everybody, welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. This is the Friday edition. If you're new to the channel, on Fridays we all get out of our chairs and we do a little dance called the Friday dance. Ready? Everybody up. Friday dance. I don't do any particular song because I don't want to get a copyright strike. Okay, back to business. Worked on this last night before. Yeah, who's your doggy? Yeah, that's a dog's mouth there. And a little spittle. See the little mouse there? He glows in the dark. I did that. I just thought it was a cute little addition. Anyway, we're here to talk about the responsibility phase of the trial of Wisconsin versus Taylor Schabusiness. It was an interesting day, day 4. This case went very, very quickly. The first phase of the trial, she was already found guilty of first-degree murder of Shad Therion, her bestie, who she went into his basement where he resided, part-time with mom. Half the time he resided with dad. But when he was with mom, he resided in the basement. Taylor went down into the basement with Shad. He gets out his dog collars and they proceed to do a little foreplay, during which she murders him. Then she chops him up, dismembers him. Mom comes down later, finds his head in a bucket, along with his penis and testicles in the bucket. I know, horrible. Okay, so she was found guilty of the first-degree murder. She was found guilty of dismembering the corpse. And she was found guilty of sexual assault because during the police interview, she admitted that after she killed him, she cuddled with him and she had sex with him. And if you want to see that full interview, I will put a link to that right here. Don't do it in front of the kids. It's sexually explicit and very gruesome. So the first person to take the stand comes in. Now, the burden has shifted to the defense. In the first phase of the trial, it was up to the prosecution to put on enough evidence that a jury could find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Taylor Schabusiness murdered Shad Therion. Now the burden shifts to the defense because she has pled not guilty by reason of insanity. The defense now has the burden of proving that she was not guilty by reason of insanity. In other words, should she be held responsible for her actions? What do you think? Let me know down in the description in the comments. Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. So here comes the first witness. Jumpsuit, chains rattling. He's shackled his hands and legs. He's shuffling down. Gets on the witness stand. Arturo Coronado, and I'm thinking, oh, who's he? Well, this is her dad. Hi, Daddy. And she's doing this. This is a typical. My grandchildren are from Guam. Their mother was from Guam, and this is done all the time in Guam. I don't know what it means, but it's not a bad sign or it's not a gang sign. It's just they do that. So she did that to her father. Anyway, so he gets on the stand and he describes how she was born in Illinois, that her brother passed away last year in a motorcycle accident, but when Taylor was 11 and a half years old, her mother died in her sleep. Now, I'm going to digress here for a second. Anytime I hear that someone has died in their sleep, I think of Chad Daybell, who's going to go on trial in April of next year for the murder of his wife, who died in her sleep. Yeah. So I'm very suspect when somebody tells me, oh, she died in her sleep. Anyway, Taylor was 11 and a half years old. He says, oh, no, she was a normal kid. She played volleyball. She had lots of friends. There was this one time that she stole somebody's band instrument, but she gave it back. Then he describes that when he thinks she was around 16. He thinks it was her last year of high school. He sends her down to Texas to live with her grandmother because her mental health was declining. Then she meets up with the guy she marries, who he called a dirtbag, a meth dealer who is in prison for being a meth dealer. Yeah. Comes back to live with him. She's pregnant. Well, because he's gone to jail. During one part, during her in one phase of her pregnancy, she's suicidal. So she agrees to go with him to the hospital, where she is put in the hospital for 3 days and put on medication. He says he was afraid that she was going to hurt herself. They put her on medication for depression. She won't take it. She's non-compliant. She doesn't think she's depressed. She's not going to take it. Now, on cross-examination, he admitted to the prosecutor that she had been doing very well. After she graduated from high school, she came back to live with him. She'd been doing very well until she met her husband. And she became a meth addict. So then while he's leaving the courtroom, I mean, his testimony was pretty quick. So while he's leaving the courtroom, she's like, I love you. And he's, I love you too. See you in prison. Okay. Baby daddy's in prison. Dad's in prison. She's going to prison. Anyway, they just set up a little crazy house on the prison. Yeah. Whatever. So I was wondering, why was he in jail, this guy? What's he in jail for? So I looked it up. Now, the jury does not know this, but he was convicted of sexually assaulting a child. So he got a 12-year sentence and followed by 18 years of probation. And he was asked one time about her child, which I gleaned was a boy. And he got very defensive. He says, what has he got to do with anything? Well, the child apparently is living with the grandmother. And there must have been some civil stuff going on with this child, and her being a meth addict, they probably took the child away from her, I suspect. In any case, the next person on the stand is Dr. Linton, this older lady who, I say that like I'm not old myself, this older lady who attempted to interview Taylor Schabusiness 3 times. The first couple of times she was nonverbal. She just sat there. She wouldn't say anything. There was one time where she threw a chair at her, and then after she threw the chair at her, she just sits down calmly. But instead of proceeding with the interview after the chair was thrown at her, because she was a little rattled by that, I've never had a chair thrown at me by anybody, and she does these kind of examinations all the time. She was hired to do both an examination to determine if she was competent to stand trial, and an examination to determine whether she was not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, this doctor combined during that, she was finally able to interview her for 2 hours, but during that interview, she was able to combine her exam to meet both of those questions. She actually came to the conclusion that she was not competent to stand trial. Now, those are two different evaluations. In order to be competent to stand trial, you have to understand the proceedings and be able to assist your counsel. She said, I don't think she understands what's going on here. Now, there was someone else who examined her on behalf of the government. The judge appointed someone to examine her who came to a different conclusion, and that's why we're here today. He said she was competent. The judge agreed with the other guy and said, yeah, you're competent. So that's why we see her sitting in this trial for the last 4 days. Dr. Linton had reviewed an extensive amount of medical records, dating all the way back to when she was 6 years old. And from 6 years old to the age of 14, she said she had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with depression. There was, at the age of 14, she was admitted to a psychiatric facility for adolescents, and she was diagnosed with a mood disorder without psychosis and some paranoia. So they put her on some medication, and in 2014, at the age of 16, she's readmitted to this same place. At this point, they note that she's on methamphetamine and marijuana. So we know that at least from the time she was 16, she has been taking methamphetamine. So during that admission, she said she was doing daily marijuana use. So they put her on antipsychotic medication for a diagnosis of mood disorder. Then there's a gap in the records, and this doctor didn't get any records until she goes to jail in 2020. She has a prior conviction for fleeing, eluding, and obstructing a police officer. Now, I don't know what that's all about, but she was sentenced to work release. During the pendency of this prior criminal conduct, the jail sent her to be evaluated. She was sent to the ER for psychosis. She was kept as an inpatient from March 22, 2021 through April 12th of 2021, where she was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, substance use, hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. She was put on medication. In fact, she refused to take the medication, and the court had to order that she take the medication. That means they're going to force you to take it. If you don't take it, they're going to make you take it. At this point, she was also put on this injectable for depression, and which means she would have had to go back to a psychiatry office during at regular intervals to get these injections, which she did not do. Then, associated with this case, she gets put into the Brown County Jail, and they say that she is suicidal. She's having these very bizarre behaviors, multiple behavioral reports. She's running around naked. She's smearing feces all over the walls and menstrual blood on the walls. She's being self-injurious. She's being nonverbal. She's isolating herself. Just weird stuff. So they send her for mental health, and they also place her on Risperidol for psychosis and impulse control, but she was non-compliant. She wouldn't take the medication. So during this interview, Dr. Linton, over the 2 hours, found that she was psychotic, that she was having visual and auditory hallucinations. She thought she saw a train. You know, you guys know what I think of trains. Anyway, she thought she saw a train, and thought Johnny Cash was on the train. She said that during the trial, during the proceedings, when she's in the courtroom, she hears someone screaming. A woman is screaming, and she hears it the entire time she's there in the courtroom. And she's paranoid. These are things that she was exhibiting during the interview. That her thought was very disorganized. She could hear a loud train whistle. The doctor asked her, "Have you ever had a head injury?" And she said, "Well, my husband used to hit me in the head." Apparently, the meth dealer husband was physically abusive towards her. So her conclusion, after reviewing everything she reviewed, including other people's reports of interviews, and she concluded that she should be found not guilty by reason of insanity. She said that she was not responsible for the criminal conduct, and that she lacked the substantial capacity to conform her behavior to the requirements of the law, that she lacked any volitional control. She She felt that she had bipolar 1 disorder. Now, bipolar 1 disorder, one of the criteria for bipolar 1 disorder is that you have to have exhibited a manic episode that lasts at least a week and cannot be related to substance use. This is why the two experts that come on for the state say, no, she did not have bipolar 1 disorder. Mm-mm. Dr. Linton was recommending that she have a neuropsychology exam to determine if she's got, brain damage. And if they found that there was brain damage, then she could be referred to a neurologist and they could handle it that way. She felt that what she was witnessing in this defendant was exceptionally unusual presentation. She said, I've never seen anything like this woman. She said the facial expressions that she would make during the interview and while she's sitting in court meet the very definition of someone who's psychotic. Just inappropriate, laughing when she shouldn't be laughing, smiling when she shouldn't be smiling, smirking, just fit the definition of someone who's psychotic. So now the jury goes to lunch. They come back from lunch and the prosecution puts on their expert. Now these experts, there's two experts the prosecution puts on. They were both hired by the state, but it was ordered by the judge. So in any case, the gentleman psychologist, he was hired to determine if she was competent to stand trial, but he has some opinions that you're going to want to hear. The female psychologist evaluated her for not guilty by reason of insanity. So he takes the stand first. So what he said that resonated with me is that the symptoms cannot occur exclusively while the person is intoxicated. So I thought, oh, you're right. Because if you look at her behavior the night of the murder, she's okay before that. We heard from one of the witnesses, AJ, who was cutting it up with them. He said her behavior was normal. He didn't see anything bizarre about her behavior that night. Then she goes to seek out methamphetamine. She and Shad go to search and purchase methamphetamine. She tells the female psychologist that she took 52 hits of methamphetamine that night prior to the murder. And she commits the murder, this psychotic episode that occurs over the next 24 hours, not a week. No. And then afterwards, she's fine. Now, when they go to arrest her, she says, do I have a warrant out for me? She's very calm. They put the handcuffs on her. They bring her back inside because it was cold outside where they arrested her. Then they bring her back in. She sits down on the stairs. She's very cooperative. So the psychologist felt there was not sufficient support for a bipolar 1 diagnosis. He felt that a lot of what she was exhibiting was feigning. What's the other word they call it? Malingering. She's doing it on purpose. And here's something he said that also resonated with me. Dr. Linton, the defense psychologist, never addressed the criminal conduct. And I thought, oh, you're right, she didn't. She never talked about that particular night, the criminal conduct that night, and how the mania didn't come on before or was exhibited afterwards. She didn't talk about any of that. She talked about what her behavior was during the interview, but not at the time the crime was committed. This is to determine if at the time that crime was committed, she was responsible for her actions, not years later in an interview. So the female psychologist who was hired to determine if she was not guilty by reason of insanity concluded that she was not entitled to that defense. She, based on her own admission that she had all this methamphetamine before the murder, she diagnosed her with meth-related use disorder, methamphetamine intoxication, and methamphetamine-induced psychotic disorder. She said the bipolar 1 disorder can manifest itself and look remarkably similar to a methamphetamine psychosis. And in the state of Wisconsin, if a person takes a drug of their own volition, drug, alcohol, whatever, and you become intoxicated, then the next question is, were you naive to the side effects? No, she wasn't naive. This had happened before. She had taken meth and gotten psychotic. She knew what the side effects were, and nobody was forcing her to do the methamphetamine. Then she explained what I just explained. There were no psychotic episodes outside the use of methamphetamine in her history. So that's what led her to the conclusion that the jury should not find that she's not guilty by reason of insanity. So the jury, they do closing arguments. The jury goes out to deliberate. They're gone for 56 minutes. They come back with their decision. And here is that clip.
Okay, be seated. You are the foreperson, is that correct?
Yeah.
If you could hand your verdict to the bailiff. Okay. The verdict seems to be in order, and I will read it as follows. Question 1. At the time the crimes were committed, did the defendant have a mental disease or mental defect? Answer, no. There's no answer then for question 2. It is dated this date, July 27, 2023, signed by the foreperson. There were no dissenting jurors. Is there a request by either of the parties to have the jury polled? Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Freilich?
Yes.
All right. We did this the last time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to poll you again. I'm going to start in the back. Ma'am, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
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 Sir, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Ma'am, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Start down here. Sir, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Ma'am, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Sir, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Sir, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Ma'am, are these your verdicts?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your service in this case is now completed.
I have to say I agree. I was wavering. I really was wavering, because I just don't think anybody in their right mind would do that. Obviously she's on methamphetamine, but lots of people do methamphetamine that don't chop up their lovers. Either way, she was never going to get out of prison. She would have gone to a prison for the criminally insane if they had found that diagnosis, or she's going to go to prison. So the sentencing was set for September, the end of September, where they have set aside an entire day. The victims will come in and have a chance to make victim impact statements, and that includes the mom, Tara, and Shad Therion's sister. Now, next week, I'm going to update you on another case that's going on. It's a mini trial. It's called a Miller hearing. When someone commits an act and they are a juvenile, they are entitled to a Miller hearing prior to sentencing. You cannot automatically sentence someone who's a juvenile to life in prison without the possibility of parole, without one of these hearings. And Ethan Crumley is undergoing this hearing. Started yesterday. Over this weekend, I will break that down and I'll give you an update that on Monday. He was the Oxford school shooter. He has pled guilty to the murder of 4 teenagers and the attempted murder of several others. He was 14 at the time he committed those acts. He has pled no contest, and his parents are in prison for their part in what he did. I'll go over all of that on Monday. Stay tuned. Meanwhile, tomorrow, no, not tomorrow, Sunday, I'm going to take tomorrow off. Sunday at 11, I will be live. It's Coffee and Chat. We'll talk about our works in progress. What are you crafting on? We'll talk about anything criminally related. If you have questions, that's the time to bring them to me. Please leave a comment about what you thought about this case. I'd love to know your thoughts. Be kind. Everybody has an opinion. I understand it. I will see you then. Bye, everyone.